All right. Thanks everyone. Thanks for joining. Welcome to the second show and tell of this year. We're very excited to have you all here because it's a very special occasion today because we have actually a birthday to celebrate, and it's Operations Hub. Hope no one was fearing to be put on the spot here. Yeah, it's the birthday of Operations Hub. It was launched. Uh, Well, Jan is gone. Rate this music on 1 to 5, 100. Okay, sorry. I was distracted by the chat. But yeah, Operations Hub turned 1 in April last year, which was, yeah, it's something I wanted to emphasize because Operations Hub is one of HubSpot's, I dare say, fastest growing product lines, not just in terms of adoption, but also just in terms of features being added to it. And in fact, I think it's primarily due to the people joining this call, all of you, our community. Operations Hub is a very community-driven product, and our product team uses, shows and tells and events like these to gather feedback and just influence the way they are developing and releasing products. So thank you all for being here and helping us grow Operations Hub together. We have a jam-packed agenda, so let's get started. I'm Jan. I'm your host for today. My pronouns are he, him, and if there's anyone out there with any visual impairments, I'm a white male. I wear glasses. I have brown hair, and I'm wearing this like light gray shirt today. I'm a marketer here at HubSpot, and I head up the RevOps and operations community. So one of my goals for this community is to create a space for operations professionals like yourself to learn and connect with one another, but also to bring our product team closer to you and vice versa. And that's why we're bringing you, of course, this event. We'll talk about everything that's been added to the newest HubSpot product line called Operations Hub. Yeah, next slide here. So here's what we'll be discussing today. I'm mindful that not everybody here was as familiar with Operations Hub, so we'll give you a quick rundown of what it is, why we built it, and why you may need it. And then we'll head on over to our product team here. We'll talk to Franz about data sync. Then we'll talk to Zach and Megan about format data actions. And lastly, we'll talk to Stephen regarding everything that's new in Datasets. And in between, as you can see, we'll leave some time for your questions. So yeah, we want to keep engagement really high today. So if you have a question, don't hesitate to ask them. You can leave them in the Q&A. If you're in your Zoom screen, there should be a black bar somewhere at the bottom, and there's like a Q&A button. Use that to type your question to us. If you do it in the chat, the chat is already very noisy, so I can't guarantee that we'll get to your questions there. But if you use a Q&A, I can guarantee we will. So with that said, let's head on over to the next slide here. After this event, we'll of course send you the recording to your inbox. The fact that you are here means that you registered, so we have your email address. You will receive the recording probably by Monday, but you can also join a community thread, and I'll put that thread in the chat right now. After this event, if you have any follow-up questions for us, the speakers of today will be in the community thread in the days following this event, and they'll be able to answer any follow-up questions you have there. If you want to rewatch or view the new recording, we also have a YouTube channel with all of the previous shows and tells, and you can find it in the chat. I just linked it. All right, let's get moving. I want to launch this poll just to get like a better idea of how familiar everyone is with Operations Hub. There are, I think, a couple of 6 options there, including all of the tools. Just select none if you haven't heard of either of them. And while everyone is filling that out, I'll actually start talking about what Operations Hub is. So allow me to kind of zoom out here a little bit and add some context to Operations Hub. Most of you will probably know HubSpot. You're here, so you probably do. We want to help our customers win on customer experience. Now, kind of the caveat there is, in order to win on customer experience, you need to have operational alignment, and that's how you win. Because when you look at the customer lifecycle, going all the way from anonymous to promoters, ops teams are the bread and butter. Yes, of course, marketing will generate leads and then sales will convert them into customers, but operations teams are really the glue that hold everything together. But when we started researching this, we actually noticed, that these ops teams aren't really set up for success. They're underwater, they're overwhelmed, they're fighting growing pains instead of driving growth, instead of driving that customer experience. Like, in fact, 60%, and this is something that we found in our research, 60% of their time is spent just fighting fires, fixing integrations, automations, creating reports, all of that. So, I mean, we conclude there's clearly a problem. We know that ops teams are the ones that are the key to unlocking a great customer experience at scale. On the other hand, they're not really set up to achieve that. So yeah, at HubSpot, we of course aim to change that. So we developed a tool, or like a product line, called Operations Hub. It's a power up, if you will. It's a suite of tools to make your op teams have it easier so they can spend less time in the trenches and more time driving strategy. And Operations Hub, as you can see on the slide, adds three core things to HubSpot CRM. First is the ability to connect your apps and sync your data. And that's where Data Sync comes in. It's a native real-time two-way syncing platform. Second is the ability to automate all of your processes. And I mean, really everything. I mean, we added custom code actions, and you can basically write your own workflow action just through a bit of JavaScript or Python code. You can also schedule your workflows and clean up your data. And then thirdly, we added just some more data, some more reporting structures. We added Datasets, which gives you the ability to curate sets of data, so it's easier for your downstream users to actually do self-reporting. And if you rather do reporting from like a BI tool and a data warehouse, we also added the native integration with Snowflake. So yeah, that's Operations Hub in a nutshell. It's a power up. It adds customizability, flexibility, horsepower to HubSpot CRM. Yeah, and I'll end the poll there. And yeah, I want to share the results maybe as well, because there's clearly a good spread. But as we see here, 50% of you, over 50%, aren't familiar with any of these tools. So I'm happy that I was able to do a bit of a context, give you some context there. But it's good for our speakers to now know that a lot of you aren't very familiar with these tools. So it's a cue for them to give a bit more context. Cool. So with that, let's go over to our first speaker of today. And that is Franz. He's the PM of Datasync Apps. Franz, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hey, Jan, and hey, everybody. I'm the Franz Leijs. I am product manager for Datasync Apps. My pronouns are he, him. And I'm excited to show you a little bit of what we've been working on for the past couple of weeks and give you a sneak preview on what we're building.
Yeah, it's great to have you here, Franz. So yeah, when we think about Datasync, I already said a bit of that. It's a real-time two-way native syncing platform. And I know that you have a lot of things that you want to present today, new updates and all of that. But let's start with the basics. Can you briefly explain what Datasync actually is?
I think so. I saw 30% of people in the poll have already experienced Datasync. In fact, the chances are if you open up a net new HubSpot account, chances are you'll be prompted to use Datasync to take your Google contacts or your Outlook contacts and throw them in your net new HubSpot account, sort of as an alternative to importing a CSV. So that's already one thing that it does, right? It connects HubSpot to any other app that you can think of. And so a lot of you may have already experienced Datasync either by syncing in Google Contacts or maybe Dynamics or Pipedrive or another CRM or MailChimp. Your experience may have been a positive one, it may have been a negative one because maybe this sync didn't like fully complete all of your integration needs. To HubSpot's point of view, what Datasync is as a feature, it's more than a feature, right? It's intended to be and to further evolve in a single, powerful, deeply integrated sync platform where we think about Datasync in a generic way. So regardless of what app you connect it with, we want to make sure that when you set up an integration, it's going to be a consistent, transparent, and trustworthy experience, regardless of what other app sits at the end of that you want to connect with the HubSpot.
All right, so just to kind of summarize, DataSync is a platform, keeps your data in two-way sync between HubSpot and any other app, and it's all on the same platform. It's a generic feel, so the look and feel experience is always the same. So, I mean, where does DataSync then actually live inside the HubSpot user interface?
We do want to, so I mean, we're dealing with connectivity, right? So the most logical place for this to sit right now, maybe that changes in the future, but it's the marketplace. This is where not only data sync apps are, you're grouped, we actually grouped them in a collection, but really the way to find data sync is you will stumble upon data sync. You're looking for dynamics integration. Well, you may find a result that is in fact a data sync integration, and that's how we like it to be. It's a level playing field here. The ecosystem has all kinds of integrations. What's unique about DataSync is that, and let me just actually take that collection here, regardless of which app you're seeing here, you're always going to get that consistent result. You know what you're getting yourself into. In fact, if I were to open up the dynamics listing here, one way, and this is for all DataSync listings the same, you get to see what you'll be able to set up a sync for. I think if you look at the ecosystem and all these integrations, there are sometimes like many different ways to set up connectivity with another app. Your mileage may vary according to the use case you want to complete. With DataSync, at least there's some sort of consistency in terms of results. For an app like Dynamics, we'll be connecting companies, contacts, deals. We're working on other object as well to sync with. A sync, I will say right off the bat, it's often a part of an integration, right? A sync is about bringing data into HubSpot or taking it out of HubSpot. Here I have a sync running for Xero. It's an accounting app. And I have a sync actively set up with my customer database in Xero. This is not an actual integration with Xero, as in, I mean, in Xero you can set up payroll, you can actually keep tally of your inventory. That's not what this sync is doing. It's just doing the customer sync for now. At one point in time, we'll expand on that, but you got to be aware of what it is that sync does and what other integrations that you install on top of this could potentially add to this existing data layer at least. Now, okay, hold up. It's show and tell. We want to show you what's new, what we've been building them. And so in the last couple of weeks, we've been basically shipping a lot of like smaller quality of life improvements. And I'll attempt to demo them as I basically walk you through DataSync here. First one that's already apparent here is the Sync Now button. And Sync Now button is basically, you don't need to sync, you don't need to hit that button for this to keep in sync, right? It's actually showing here. This is a second feature that we launched. In the health, we're showing you what is now actively being kept in sync. These are the contact records that existed on either side of my sync, and HubSpot not only moved them over from one app from one side to the other, it's also actively monitoring these contacts for changes happening. That's why it's called in sync. Not all contacts made it across. Some contacts failed to sync across, and that's what we list here in the failing to. I think we're giving you like an error log of what we're trying to sync to one side or another, but we're failing to for whatever reason. If as soon as you fix a certain error, this error will disappear and it'll sync across. Rather similar to like the workflow logging that you get, like workflow error logging that you get. Except that this is not really to be seen as like events happening in place. This is HubSpot continuously trying to keep a state of synchronization across the two systems. Another feature that we silently launched, in fact, today, like a couple of hours ago, people should know that you can connect multiple multiple accounts of a certain app. Shifting gears here, I'm now connecting here. Here you can see my sandbox of Dynamics. Potentially, I first want to hook up my sandbox, and then once I feel comfortable, I maybe want to connect my actual production environment. You can be connecting multiple environments of the same app. That we already had that feature since the beginning, but we just launched this here, which is if you ever want to maybe some permissions got screwed up and you want to reconnect this very same account, you can do so as well because you didn't have that possibility prior. So that's already the third feature that is like silently shipped. Let me actually go ahead and set up a sync. In the case of a contact sync, typically I would get leads sent into HubSpot, which I need to send over to my sales rep. So that's your typical sync setup experience here. Where what do you want to do in a sync? Well, you got to tell which records you want to see synced. Maybe you want basically all your databases mixed together. Maybe you want to apply some filtering in that. The nuanced update that we shipped in terms of this filter here, we got a lot of feedback that one filter is not enough, and we're still very much working on a more advanced filtering thing where you could be setting up a filter like, okay, if it's owned in my other app by this and the territory is that, like, we're still working on that, but at least one small thing that we have now is the ability to, within a certain filter, select multiple users, because we didn't give you that feature in the past. So at least you can now have a multi-select, which hopefully unlocks a couple of use cases already. Apart from defining and giving you more granular control as to like what is part of a sync, we have shipped a couple of smaller updates in the field mapping stable. Unfortunately, not yet drop-down field mapping as some folks might hope. We're working on that. You can sync a drop-down field one way, but there's small. We're calling them QOL, right? Quality of life. The ability to, as you are confronted with your data, with your properties in this raw fashion, and as you're like deciding what to map from one system to the other, we're going to give you like immediate control as to like, wait a minute, we don't really call it postal code, or maybe we don't really call it country region. Maybe we want to quickly change how this field behaves. You can edit those on the fly without, because prior you had to exit out of this, go to your settings, change the property files, go back here, and then refresh this field table. It was quite cumbersome. And more importantly, as you're setting up field mappings, hey, you're gonna find some properties here in your other app. Still, I'm using Dynamics. I could be using NetSuite or whatever, where you're finding, oh, that rating field. Actually, we do need that in HubSpot, don't we? Cool. But oh, I don't have a property in HubSpot to receive that rating. Previously, you'd had to exit out of this, go create a property, go back here, refresh the list. Right now, we give you that ability to just on the fly create that label, Dynamics rating. I'll just drop it in here. Don't need that on forms, and I could just create that on the fly. And not only have you created the property, it's also just immediately part of your field mapping. So little quality of life improvements just to make setting up that sync easier. That's it, yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Frans. Amazing. It's great to not only get a demo of what data sync is, but also get all of the updates along the way. A lot of quality of life updates that were shipped very silently, as you said. So I appreciate you going through all of that. To kind of summarize, so we have over 100 natively built integrations. They're all two-way historical syncs. There's multiple objects that we support: contacts, there's companies, there's deals, also associations, which is not really an object, but I mean, that's something also important. And you can, as you show, you can find them in the marketplace under Datasync built by HubSpot. So you've shown a lot of things that were added very recently. Can you kind of lift the veil on what's to come?
I teased on this I think in a previous presentation, but we're working on deepening out these things, like making mappings work better, but also more objects. So as I'm thinking, like dealing with an app like Xero, as you can see, I've got a product sync running here. I'm in my QA environment. That's something I'm running a private beta of right now. So I'm call to action here that if ever you're using any of these apps, either actively in Datasync right now, or you'd be interested in setting up a sync and integration with any of these apps. So these are mostly your sort of accounting, invoicing apps or ERP type of apps where you're dealing with a product library. So in HubSpot, apart from your contacts, your companies, your deals, you also have a product library, which is the source library that you use when you're adding a line item to a deal or to a quote. That product library, maybe you're managing it in HubSpot entirely, but if you're using an app like Xero, for instance, it's actually very probable that you have that data living in Xero, right? If I'm selling T-shirts, then all of my T-shirts and hoodies are stored in my Xero, in my ERP solution, along with prices, along with inventory tracking, etc. This is now an object that we can actively keep in sync with HubSpot, so that when you're building out those quotes, you can grab a product out of that library, and it just the same way as it works with contacts and companies and deals, it's actively kept in, as you wish, in a two-way sync. If you want, you can only just have it sync one way, but how cool is it to have a two-way sync of that product library, so that if I'm actually going to go to my product library right here, which you can find under objects, it's a little bit hidden. Just this notion that this product library here, that this is very much live, feeding off of what's living in my actual ERP solution, and having a two-way sync of this, it's pretty cool. We were already doing this for Shopify and QuickBooks, but those are ironically apps not living on the Datasync framework. They are going to be moved on to Datasync soon. But as I mentioned, like, these are the apps that already live on the Datasync framework, and if you have any need to sync that product library, I'd love to get you hooked up on that private beta. So I think you know what people need to do for that, Jan.
Yeah, I've put in the chat
cool.
your email address. So if the apps that Franz just showed, if you're using any of these apps, you're using Datasync, and you want to sync products as well over two-way, send Franz an email, and he'll be able to hook you up. And I see we have a couple of questions here coming in. So yeah, let's try and get through those. Let's see if there's any operations, any Datasync ones. I see here when OpsHub was first released, it was centered around contact record sync. Has the team pushed towards other object types? And I think the answer is yes, but if you want to expand on that.
No, it's like we took the logical order of contacts, and then we figured out this thing about associations, so companies and keeping the associations in sync. Deals was the next thing, because deals are in fact associated to companies or contacts, so it wouldn't have made sense to release that without association sync. And now you're looking at basically all the other objects are up for grabs, right? Product library was the first one that came to mind. You're seeing other objects living in the HubSpot framework. One day or another, they'll become part of it.
All right, thanks. One more question. Well, there's a couple of more questions. I'll pick this one. Can we use WooCommerce in Datasync?
You cannot use it in Datasync. It's one of these examples where, when we decided which apps should we roll out, we looked at the ecosystem, and we know that there is this WooCommerce integration that exists out there. It's made by a company called Make Web Better, and it basically does, or it would have done the same thing and more, as opposed to Datasync. So we didn't really find it was our place to jump in the ecosystem and to build something comparable to there. So we haven't rolled it out yet. If there's specific use case that you think would be solved by Datasync more so than the existing solution, maybe let me know as well. Fleis@hubspot.com.
All right, I'll pick one more question here. How long until you can sync drop-down properties? This is a huge issue for our integrations.
It's tricky to give out ETAs, but I think it's fair to state in this forum here that as a product team, we have these like goals that we want to finish for this year's, and drop-down mappings is one of those. So.
Okay, there are plenty of more questions, but we have to keep moving. At the end, we'll normally should have some time to get through all of the others, so no worries. If we don't get to your questions today, we will of course make a follow-up post in the community and invite everyone over there, and I'll make sure that Franz and Megan and Stephen will answer all of these questions. But yeah, we have to keep moving. We have a whole presentation here. But yeah, thanks, Franz. Appreciate all of the insights. It's time for our next presenter. We just talked about data sync. Let's now move on over to the next tier when it comes to Operations Hub. You know, on free and starter, you had data sync and connecting all of your apps. On the professional side, you unlock a lot of abilities on the workflow side. So we have with us here Megan and Zach to talk a little bit more about format data actions and some new interesting stuff there. So Megan and Zach, yeah, welcome. Feel free to introduce yourselves.
Thank you, Jan. I'm going to share my screen. And okay, so as mentioned, I'm Megan Legg. I'm a product manager for automation at HubSpot. My pronouns are she, her. I'm going to talk a little bit about updates my team has made recently to the format data workflow action. Now, based on the poll, it seems that many people here have not used it yet. So I'm going to dive into a little bit of context about where the feature is to date and then how it's evolving. So the format data action in workflows can be used to standardize or enhance data using automation. It makes your data cleanup and transformation an automatic process, saving manual effort and time, and helps keep your CRM orderly and useful. So some of the most popular use cases that people are using this action for today would be capitalizing names on records to create a consistent experience either within the CRM or when you're communicating with your customers. Another popular use case is enriching date values. For example, if you have a subscription start date and you want to add a set amount of time to come up with that subscription end date and automatically calculate that. So the values that you transform using this action in workflows can either be saved back to your CRM or you can use them in other workflow actions. We are making this action more flexible and more powerful now by introducing what we're calling custom mode. It is currently live in beta. And this new mode has been inspired by our colleagues over in Datasets in the reporting tool. So shout out to Stephen and his team. You'll hear from them next in the show and tell, but they've given us a lot of inspiration and support in this project. The style of building formulas will evolve into something that will feel very similar if you've used Datasets or if you have experience using spreadsheet tools like Google Sheets or Excel. So now we'll dive into what is new with custom mode. So again, on the left, I've got the original version of the action. A quick overview of how you'd interact with this is you would first select a property that's going to be your input and the value that you want to transform in some way. And then you're going to choose your function, so applying a format or formula to that value. So next time you visit this action or the first time you visit this action, you can keep using it this way if it meets your needs. It will serve a lot of our popular common use cases, or you'll be able to toggle over into custom mode and you can also build formulas there, or you can use some of the exciting new functionality. So in custom mode, there are 3 particularly exciting developments that I'll go over. The first would be the ability to use more than one input value in your formula. So for example, your deals all have a deal amount, but they've also perhaps been assigned a commission rate. You might want to multiply these 2 things together to automatically calculate what the actual commission payout is. With the original version of the action, you'd only ever be able to run a calculation on one property, but with custom mode, you can use both of these as dynamic input values in part of a formula that you build. So it's going to open a lot of brand new use cases up. The second is the ability to apply more than one formula or formatting change at a time to get that desired end result. Again, with the original version of the action, you're just making one change at a time. So for example, if you wanted to cut all the special characters out of a phone number, the way this worked in the previous world was you'd add a format data action that removes dashes. But then you'd have to add a second format data action to remove parentheses. So while you could serve your needs there, it could make a rather time-consuming workflow to build, and your workflow might get really long and complicated. One of the improvements that custom mode introduces is you can make a whole bunch of changes all in one step. So if you had a phone number and you wanted to remove any and all special characters from it, you just write a single expression and you can get them all out with one action. And then finally, there are 2 brand new formulas that are going to be in custom mode, join and concatenate. So these are formulas that take several different inputs and combine them into one value. So back to my first point about custom mode, it supports the use of many different inputs, and so that makes these formulas an exclusive feature of custom mode by nature. So I've given you sort of the overall context about custom mode and some about format data, and we can transition into the part that you're probably eagerly awaiting, which would be seeing some examples in action. So in order to do that, I'm going to hand off to Zach. He's an engineer on the workflows team. He helped build custom mode, and he can walk you through some of the new functionality and show off some cool use case examples.
Sweet. Thank you, Megan. My name is Zach. I'm a software engineer here, and as Megan said, I helped build this feature. Today, I'm here to help give you a tour of the features and walk through a couple examples that highlight some of the power of this new feature. So let me share my screen. Okay. The first example I'm going to show you is of a formula that uses multiple dynamic input values, which was one of the sort of use cases that Megan walked you through. So let's say you have two known values, and with those values, you want to calculate a third value. In this example, given a deal's contract start date and contract length, let's say you want to automatically calculate and save what the deal's contract end date will be. To touch on one of Megan's points, some use cases like this could be done using the original format data action, but would require many extra steps. So you can see in this workflow, we're using a branch to identify a contract length, and then using a format data action customized for each contract length. If the contract length is 3 months, for example, we add 3 months to the start date to calculate the end date. This makes for a complicated workflow, and if your contract lengths are variable and not a nice, neat set of few options like this, this branch system would quickly become difficult to manage. But now with custom mode, we can simply use both contract start date and contract length as inputs to one formula and do all this work with a single action. So I'm going to show you that next. So here I sort of have a blank workflow set up, and I've just set up some enrollment criteria. But what I really want to show you is how we can set up a format data action. So all we need to do here is turn on custom mode, and let's begin writing our formula. So again, the scenario is we're going to take our start date, add our contract length, and calculate the end date. And we'll do that using the same formula as before, plus time, but we'll be able to simplify this a lot. So I'm going to select the plus time formula. We'll be prompted with this documentation here that sort of explains how this formula works. So we can see that it adds amount of time to a date time object. And that object for us is going to be our contract start date. Then we can see the next argument here is the amount to add to the date time object. And we know that we want that to be our length. Finally, the last argument is time unit, the unit of time to be added. And we can see the possible values are seconds, minutes, hours, etc. And we know we want that to be months. And I'm going to leave this box checked, which just says that we're going to take the value from this output and start a copy property value action with it. And then to close the loop, all we need to do is choose the property we want to save this output into, which would be our contract end date. And now we started with something that looks like this, but with this new feature, we can do this much more simply and much more powerfully. But let's take this to the next level. One of the other exciting new features in this with this product is the ability to apply multiple formulas in one step. Let's say that what we actually want to find out is when 15 days before the contract end date is, and that's the date I want my reps to reach out and start discussing renewal. If I've built, for what I've built so far, all I need to do is just subtract 15 days from it. I can actually take the results of this formula and use it as the input to another formula right in line. So let's say I want to do a minus time this time, where the first argument is our contract end date that we've calculated. Let's say we want to subtract 15 days. And just like that, we have our custom formula, which uses minus time and plus time to figure out what 15 days before the contract end date is. And we took something like this and we really powered it up. So that's a really awesome example. Really excited to see what you guys do with that. I'm going to take you through something else now. So Megan was talking about some new formulas that we added, join and concatenate. And both of these will help you take several values and combine them together. So they'll help you take your existing data and get even more value out of it. And what I'm going to show you is an example of join. In this example, we're going to take some information we already have about a company and use it to create custom standard value for all of our company records in the About Us property. This will help reps have a quick high-level overview when they open up a new company record. So let me open up format data. We'll go to custom mode like before. So let's say for my team, the most important piece of information to get at a glance are industry, location, and number of employees. I can put these three properties together, even adding an additional structure to form this into a complete sentence. So let's start with our join function. And I sort of mentioned the three pieces of information we were interested in: our industry, geography, and number of employees. So for the join function, it's gonna, the first option here is a separator, which is what do you want to put between each item in the list? So for us, maybe that's a space. Cool. And then I mentioned earlier, we want to add some additional context here to make this read like a sentence. So maybe we want this to say something like industry, company in region with employees. So this hopefully will just read, seems like I have an error here. Let me just make sure I have this correct. Oh, I forgot a comment. Cool. So this will read as industry, company in blank with blank employees. And that's sort of the sentence that we have in mind that we want to save to this About Us property. And I'll run this one and show you guys what that looks like. So let's save this to About Us. Save. Cool. Everything looks good. So I'm going to turn my workflow on. And let's enroll a company. Operations Inc. That will just take 1 second to get through the workflow. And let's take a look at what happened here. Cool, we can see that the action succeeded. Let's go take a look. Cool, so we can see that Operations Inc. is a apparel company in Canada with 500 employees. And so any company that we enroll in that workflow will now have this beautiful About Us section. I think you guys can appreciate the power of that, and I'm so excited to see what you guys build. So that's all we have to show you today. We're going to keep working on this, keep adding features to it. Please let us know your thoughts. If you're interested in the beta, please let us know. And Jan's going to share out a form that you can sign up. So with that, I'll toss it back to you guys.
That's that's amazing, Zach. Megan, congrats. I mean, just looking, I'm not sure if you've been paying attention to the chat, but it's been crazy. People are super excited about this new feature, and I mean, they're completely right. This is really a game changer for everything in workflow. So, I mean, great job. I put there's a form if you want to sign up for the beta. I put it in the chat. I'll paste it there once more. Can't access the form. It's still private. Oh no. Let me see if I can open it up on the fly. In the meantime, I'm going to ask you a question, Megan. There's a couple of more in the chat here that I can see. Okay, so there's one I think is about format data action from Larissa. Does an overview or list of potential use cases exist where data format can be used, or does it where it makes sense?
Yeah, so right now we're in the beta period and we're sort of getting all of our ducks in a row. So we're working on documentation that outlines all the different functionality that's possible in the action. And then I think Ari followed up that we do have a use case library for some of our other workflow actions. So we'll be sure to prioritize getting some format data use cases added there.
All right, awesome. In the meantime, I'm trying to figure out how to open up this this beta form, but I mean, there's probably some more questions here. I think there was one question about webhook triggers, and I think you or it's someone on your team is also working on that, and the person was asking when it will be added. to workflows in general?
Yeah, that project is definitely a priority. There's a couple other things that need to come first, but it's something that the team is sort of already doing discovery and planning for.
Okay. Okay. Well, I don't think I'm going to be figuring out how to enable this form during this session. So my apologies for that. But of course, we all have. I mean, you signed up for this, so we have your email address. I'll make sure it's in the follow-up email. But my apologies for that. I should have probably figured that out before we went live. Cool. Seeing if there's some more questions here for you, Megan. I see a question here by Callie, of course, friend of the community. Callie says, "Hi, Megan. Is there a way to use variables in format data? For instance, if I want to trim everything after a slash or a single line text, something similar like that."
So I would think of variables as sort of like those dynamic values that you can insert. So like a property where every record that comes through the workflow is going to have a different deal amount. And so you put the variable of deal amount property in your formula, and then that will populate for the records that enroll. As far as we have a cut function, so that might pertain to what you're talking about, like removing slashes. We also have something that removes HTML markup. So maybe that would be helpful. And I'll again point to, we're going to do a KB doc that sort of outlines all those functions with examples. So hopefully that would help clarify what you can do.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Megan. And I mean, great job. We'll move on over to the last segment because we're almost at time and we still need to talk about data sets. So yeah, we had operations of professional. We just covered that with the new format data actions. Now we'll move on over to operations of enterprise. We'll talk a bit more about data sets, and we have Stephen here, who's the PM of data sets. So welcome, Stephen. Yeah, feel free to introduce yourself.
Howdy, I'm Stephen. Pronouns he, him. I am the PM of Datasets. Megan, Zach, that was a cool demo. I thought the join function was actually like super cool. But today, I'm just going to walk you through like a little bit of a high level of what Datasets is. It sounds like, I think it's like 16% of people have used before. The rest of y'all is mostly new. And then I'm going to get into a little bit more of advanced use cases, which just kind of shows the power of Datasets. So any questions for me, Jan, for our screen share?
No, you can go ahead.
Let's do it. Desktop. Okay, cool. Hopefully you're seeing HubSpot. So define data sets is under reporting. Data reports, drop down, data sets, and I'm going to take you through the creation flow in a basic way. The first screen of data sets should really remind you of Custom Report Builder. The first step you're doing here with your ops analysts, your data savvy marketers, whoever's really kind of in charge of like getting your data correct for downstream reporting, goes in this tool. And the first step is curating a useful data table. So in the screen, we can connect multiple tables. I can say the contact table and take deals, for example, and I get a preview to understand a little bit what's happening in this join. Here, the primary data source is contacts, secondary is deals. What's happening here is we're defining a left join. That's important. It's important for your data people because it actually defines what's in this table. As you can see, it's taking all of my contacts in the system. And if there's a deal attached to it, it's taking that deal. That looks different than if I were to take deals as a primary data source and then join contacts, where I would get every single deal and then only the contact information if it's related to a deal that we know exists. So for this example, I'm going to take deals and just companies. And then I'm going to move on to the next section, prepare. Here, what I'm doing is selecting the data that matters most for your reporting use cases. If I was in SQL or something like that, it would be a select statement. Here, I'm selecting the columns of data that matter most for a report that I'm going to make downstream or a report that a teammate might make, and they just need a little more focus. So for a sales data set, I might take deal name, amount, maybe the assigned date of the deal. And at this step, if I were to make a data set off this, I'd have three things to report on: deal name, amount, assigned date. all of the noise that occurs between like hundreds of properties potentially in your portal wouldn't be involved in this data set, and they would just be working off this very small curated data set. Next, I would do things like recontextualize the data they're working with. So if we call amount monthly recurring revenue, I might want to rename that property. I might want to understand things that aren't available in HubSpot because they need to be calculated. So we can create new formula fields in datasets. But I wanted to understand, for example, the annual recurring revenue. If we have the monthly recurring revenue, I would take MRR and I'll multiply it by 12. That is not 12. And I'll take it, multiply by 12, and you would get ARR. If I wanted to understand how many days has a deal been open since it's been assigned till today, I can do things like use different functions related to dates, such as date diff. There's a lot of them here, and I can derive the information that matters most to me. So for this example, date diff, I want to understand how many days exist between the assigned date of a deal and today, which I'm going to nest another function in here, like now, and it should return the number of days. Days between assign / today. So this is a simple data set that I would make real quick, just showing you guys the general flow of how things are created, and I can apply filters to this as well. I have made a slightly more built out data set, but similar information is here, and I'll go through some of the more advanced fields I built out when you guys weren't here. But basically, there's deal name here, company name, amount, which we called MRR previously, a bunch of dates, deal owner, and city. Additionally, I've done a couple of things here. I've done the date diff formula that I just walked y'all through, deal assign date, and now. I've also realized that my portal has bad data, basically. It's pretty hard to actually understand the days between. For most companies, it depends on the sales cycle length. You might have 30 days between the assigned date of a deal and when you expect it to be closed. My data is all fake, so it's like 508 days. It's like ridiculously useless. So I've done something basically taken these dates and I've created quartiles. So I've used another function called with bucket, used the formula that we just made, and I've sorted data into different buckets. So basically, the reason why this is helpful is it helps me contextualize like what is important with these date buckets. If it's 4, that means it's been open for a super long period of time, 508. But imagine if you had more reasonable numbers, this might just be 30. And then if it's 1, it has been open very long. This is the actual column that I use to define logic and other formulas that I made. So one formula I made was called priority. And I used a new kind of conditional field where we have a little bit of a like guidance, take you through one or more complex formulas. If here, this is the start out, sorry. This is how you would start out. You basically start with a blank field and you're able to fill in one conditional block at a time, adding more conditional blocks as it makes sense for your business. In the example that I set out here, the first conditional block evaluates as if the amount of the deal, amount here, is less than 50,000, and the quartile is not 3 and is not 4, then call it low priority. In plain English, this means if I'm making less than $50,000 and the deal has not been open for a long time or a very long time, because quartiles go up, then define it as low priority. I then added a new conditional block just by clicking this button and said, if the amount is less than 100,000 and the days between is not a very long time, call it medium priority. Otherwise, finally, if the amount is greater than 100,000 or the quartile is 4, meaning it's been open forever, call it high priority. And what this really does is it takes every line of data that I'm making this data set and it recontextualizes it into 3 easy to understand words: low priority, medium priority, or high priority. So when I'm giving this data set to my sales team to work with, they're not going to worry about all of this conditional logic and setting up the data set. They're going to work with the terms high, medium, and low. And I'll show this in a second. The final thing I want to show before we basically move on to how this like actually visualizes in a report where your sales or marketers might be using this is show the same logic, but with a little bit of a twist. I've used a concatenation and then said so this is the same logic, amount 50,000 quartiles. concatenate the deal owner ID and then use low priority. So I have low priority, medium priority, high priority, like the last example, but I've also included the deal owner name so that people understand exactly who owns the deal along with their priority deal. That's important for a reason that I'll show here. So zoom out a little bit. This is what your sales team is going to see. When they're making a new report, they're not going to be worrying about the whole data set process. They'll just have a few different properties that are focused on what matters the most. So if I'm a sales manager and I'm dragging in the deal amount, I want to understand the priority of that deal amount. And I might want to understand who owns these deals. And I can easily see, here are my high priority deals. It's about $629,000. Here are my low priority deals and medium priority deals. I can hover and see that Christina owns more than half of this and Stephen owns less than half. The reason I want to show you what the power of concatenating values and really the real geist of data sets, which is giving you more control over your data. Right now, this whole view is just determined by 3 different bars. If I wanted to say deal priority and deal owner, now I have as many bars as unique values as I had. So I can see Stephen's high priority deals, low priority deals, medium priority deals, and then Christina's, she only has high priority deals right now. And instead of needing to use a whole breakdown section just to understand who owns the deals, I free up this and I can see it broken down by city. So now I can see what deals Stephen owns, what cities those deals are being actually originated from. And I can really break down my data with more specificity and get more information in one report view. And I can easily pivot this to be a different kind of visualization. If bar charts don't make sense for you, all of these visualization types are able to be used, and you can use the same data that you're making in data sets anywhere. So I've spoken for a while and I haven't looked at the chat at all. That's the demo. Any questions?
Thanks, Stephen. Yeah, I think most of the chat was related to the form and some errors, but the form is fixed now. You can submit and enter all of your details. I also think that the issue with the with you getting the prompt that it doesn't work is also resolved at the moment. But Megan also provided her email address. So if you want to sign up, we only need your Hub ID and your email address, basically. That's enough for you to enroll. I think next time we'll probably try on a lighter weight form. But thanks, Stephen, for explaining these amazing new features in Datasets. I love the new UI for the conditional functions there. I'm scrolling to the Q&A because we have so many questions. We have over 30 questions and we have definitely not the time to go through them, but I'll try and see if there's 1 or 2 we can still answer today. Let me see. I saw someone, but my screen keeps jumping. Let me see.
While you're searching, similar to the request for use case library with custom format actions and workflows, that's something we're working on in Datasets because we realized that a lot of the functions aren't always intuitive at first glance, and sometimes it's helpful to get your imagination turning. So we're trying to figure out exactly a couple of maybe 10 or so examples so we can give to y'all, and that'll be published similar to the custom coded action library that exists in workflows.
Yeah, and yeah, while you were saying that, I found 2 questions. One's by chat. Is there a good way to use Datasets in Operations Hub to calculate churn percentages or total MRR growth percentages over a period of time?
I'm making some assumptions about the formula you would use to get these percentages, namely that you need some numerator divided by total in the denominator, which would be math that currently isn't possible. That's something that's the highest priority team. And with the reporting, we're hoping to get something along those lines, operable, hopefully this year. But rest assured, this is the highest priority team to get aggregate math, which I think those 2 examples would be good examples of churn percentage and I think you said lifetime value percentage maybe.
Yeah. and I'm afraid we're running out of time, so I'm afraid I won't be able to ask any more questions. But we have around 30 right now in the Q&A and probably a couple more in the chat. Rest assured, everyone, we will still be able to answer these questions. I'll make sure that these questions are listed and answered in our community. When you get the recording, probably Monday, there will be a link to a community post that where all of these questions are answered by the good people on this call today. So yeah, apologize, but I really appreciate all of these questions coming in. I always love to see all of that engagement. Before you go, there will be a survey at the end of this webinar. Just a heads up, there's only one required question, so please fill it out just so we have some feedback on this event that we can improve it for next time, because this is a quarterly event. We do this every quarter. Next one will be in August. And yeah, that's the end of this webinar. I want to thank everyone for being here. Maybe a couple more CTAs. If you want to sign up for the product sync demo, feel free to just send Franz an email. I'm putting his email in the chat once more. And there's also the form. I'll put that in the chat again. And I didn't paste the link. There it goes. So just a couple of CTAs, but I want to thank everyone for being here. Really appreciate you spending time with us. Special thanks to Stephen, Megan, Zach, and Franz, of course, for these great demos and showcasing these great new features. I had a blast. And yeah, I want to thank everyone again. See you next time back in August or in the community. Who knows? Thank you, and have a great rest of your day.